So we're here at Meadow Park for the Women's FA Cup fifth round tie between Arsenal and Manchester City. In just a few minutes, the North Bank behind me will be filling up with fans coming into the ground. Another sellout at Meadow Park, as it always is. And this feels like a really defining game for Arsenal's season, with the loss at West Ham last weekend putting Arsenal 6 points behind Chelsea at the top of the league. The WSL title is looking increasingly unlikely. Obviously, there's no Champions League, so this feels really, really pivotal today. Arsenal have a really good record here against Manchester City at Meadow Park. They've won on every occasion under Jonas Eidevall, but they're pretty much always tight games, with the exception of one about 2.5 years ago that Arsenal won 5-0. Arsenal aren't going to win 5-0 today, sorry to spoil it for you, but these games are generally decided by very, very tight margins. City were probably slightly unlucky to lose the game in November in the league, so this is going to be a really, really tight game. Man City are on a brilliant run of form. Everybody knows about the threat of their front three: Chloe Kelly, Lauren Hemp and Bunny Shaw. Possibly one of, well, not possibly, definitely one of the best forward lines in women's football, argument for the best, and Arsenal are going to have to be their best to keep them out today. However, they're at home. To win the FA Cup, you have to beat at least one of Manchester City or Chelsea, and the best you can really hope for in that scenario is probably a home draw, which Arsenal have got here today, with around 4,000 Arsenal fans expected. Big day for Arsenal, but it's there for them to go through to the next round and make themselves one of the favourites for the FA Cup, which they haven't won since 2016, which is a very, very long time for a club like Arsenal. So let's hope that we're at Wembley again in May, but a lot of that will depend on what happens today. So we're underway at Meadow Park for the FA Cup fifth round. No Vivian Miedema in the squad today. Told that she's had a little bit of an irritation in the knee. They're going to let that settle down for a couple of weeks and see what happens, and that will take us into the international break. But Kyra Cooney-Cross starting in midfield, Sabrina D'Angelo in goal, Frida Mornham number 10. That suggests to me that Arsenal are going to have a real focus on counter-attacking and maybe taking advantage of those transitions, as they did when they beat Manchester City here in November. But let's see. I think it's going to be a very tight one, this. So we're halfway through the half here, still 0-0, as you'd expect, very nip and tuck. Both teams having periods of dominance, periods of possession, no real open, clear-cut chances yet. Arsenal possibly lucky to get away with not conceding a penalty. Lotte Wubben-Moy with, shall we say, an industrial challenge on Bunny Shaw in the area. Arsenal, Frida Mornham staying very, very close to you, Hasegawa, as you'd expect. Katie McCabe coming into midfield from full-back. Lots of different kind of additions and dynamics that both coaches have gone for. Chloe Kelly and Lauren Hemp have swapped sides, so both coaches have kind of made little alterations around the edges, but still no breakthrough here. 0-0 halfway through the first half. So it's Arsenal 0, Manchester City 0 at half-time. As you'd expect, very, very nip and tuck game, very few clear-cut chances. I would say City have shaded that first half, certainly in terms of territory. From the good side for Arsenal, even though City have probably had a bit more of the ball in the final third, they haven't really created anything clear-cut yet. And Jonas Eidevall talked about stopping those crosses coming in. City crossed the ball pretty much more than any team in Europe, and with Hemp and Kelly out wide and Shaw up front, you can see why they do that. And Arsenal have been good at stopping those opportunities. But Arsenal clearly setting up to play on the counter-attack, but there's a few times where they've had good situations on the counter. And kind of one of the problems we've seen a lot this season, I think, is just players taking too many touches, losing good situations, players running into offside positions or losing the ball. I just think Arsenal need to tighten up on how quickly they release the ball on the counter-attack. But probably no surprises here that it's 0-0 so far and that the teams are so evenly matched. So beginning of the second half here, no changes, certainly in personnel. We wait and see if Arsenal have a bit of a change in approach already, looking maybe a little bit more aggressive on the ball in the first seconds of this second half, which is something I think they really need. As I said earlier, I think they need to do things more quickly and fewer touches, but let's see. Could be in for a long afternoon. We could go to extra time here. These teams very evenly matched, as I'm sure everyone expected before the game. So halfway through the second half, still 0-0. Better from Arsenal in this half, playing a little bit higher up the pitch, a little bit more aggressive. They've just made a couple of changes. Steph Catley for Katie McCabe and Stina Blackstenius for Alessia Russo. I think the latter is about attacking the goal a bit more. Russo, I think, does absolutely everything brilliantly. Sometimes just doesn't drive towards the 6-yard box and the goal enough. And I think that's what bringing Stina on is about for City. Bunny Shaw has just gone off. with a bit of an injury, which has to be seen as a bit of a boost for Arsenal. She went very close with a couple of headers a couple of minutes ago, and obviously she's possibly the best striker in the WSL at the moment. City have brought on Mary Fowler as a bit of a false nine, I think, so it'd be interesting to see how Arsenal deal with that, but still 0-0. 1-0 Manchester City. Leila Alexandri from a set piece. Look, slightly contentious, thought it was quite harsh to give a foul against Caitlin Ford, but City get the free kick into the area. They've looked very, very dangerous from set pieces this afternoon. Ball ricochets to Leila Alexandri right in front of the goal, and it's 1-0, and Arsenal have got a fight in their hands now to get back into this game.
The court official has indicated there'll be a minimum of 6 additional minutes. A minimum of 6 additional minutes.
So it finished Arsenal 0, Manchester City 1. As always in these fixtures, very, very tight game, decided by tight margins. In the past here against Manchester City, those margins have gone Arsenal's way. Today they went Manchester City's way, scoring through Leia Alexandri through a free kick with about 15 minutes to go. Arsenal piled the pressure on after that. Chiara Keating made a number of really, really good saves, one from Pelova from a header, one from Kim Little from a volley. A little bit of controversy at the end with a stoppage time corner from Beth Mead. It looked like Chiara Keating might have carried that over the line. Whether the whole ball went over the line, I don't know. I haven't seen a good enough angle on it yet. But there's no denying that this is a really damaging result for Arsenal's season. I've just spoken to a pretty crestfallen Jonas Eidevall, who's, you know, I think quite understandably said there's not a lot wrong with the performance today. This is just a really good team. It's all very tight margins, but at the same time, clearly with the WSL title challenge kind of really on the rocks going out of the Champions League, this was a huge, huge defeat for Arsenal today, because it takes away one of the 2 trophies they can realistically win. But they play London City Lionesses in the Conti Cup quarter-final on Wednesday night. That's a very winnable game. If they win that, they have a semi-final at home to Aston Villa. So focusing on getting into the Conti Cup semi-final, and next week they've got a huge game at home to Manchester United. If they win that, they put a 7-point gap to Manchester United in 4th place and don't quite assure Champions League qualification, one of those top 3 Champions League qualification spots. But if they win that game, they're really nearly there in the top 3, which is not really what Arsenal wanted this season, but it's what they've got at the moment, and that's what they've got to go for, because if they win the next 2 games, the next 2 games are a bit like cup semi-finals really. But it's finished Arsenal 0, Manchester City 1.